Failure mode and effect analysis, the way it works is you're going to identify the potential bugs, which I've been calling quality risk items up until now, but which they refer to as failure modes. Okay, so what are the different failure modes that the system can exhibit? And then you're going to do something that's the opposite of what's done in hazard analysis. In hazard analysis, you look upstream. You ask yourself, how is it that I come to be exposed to this risk to begin with? Effect analysis, you actually look downstream and you say, okay, if this failure mode occurs in production, what is the effect on the stakeholders? Okay, and they cast the stakeholder net pretty broadly. You know, it's not be society in general, right? Anybody who could potentially be impacted by the system. It's very precise. You can imagine that the impact ratings that you would get in this circumstance would be quite precise because you're trying to think through all the different failure scenarios and how they affect people. It is meticulous, you tend not to miss things, and it is general purpose. It can be used in a lot of different situations, assuming that you work around the inherent tendency to be subsystem by subsystem and you do more systemic approach. The problem is that it is a really lengthy process. Like I said, you know, easily 5 to 10 times as much net effort as the lightweight technique that I showed you earlier. Documentation is a big part of that. So where we typically see, you know, 100 to 200 risk items in a typical risk-based testing kickoff, we've done failure mode and effect analysis for clients on projects, and you've got 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 items in the spreadsheet, line items. And that's a lot of work to maintain. I mean, that's like a full-time job, you know. And it's hard to learn. It's not the kind of thing where you could learn to do it in a week. You know, as I said before, if a client asked us to come in and help him kick off failure mode and effect analysis, the first thing I do is try to talk them out of it and say, well, no, let's just do the lightweight one. And then if they said, no, we absolutely have to have failure mode effect analysis, I'd say, okay, 5 weeks. You know, it's just going to take that much longer to go through it and to get it up and running. And if you're on a very high risk, very conservative type of project, I guess maybe you can justify that if you have the budget for it. The thing that really worries me in just about every organization that we've worked with is that the testing team is, you know, they're not going to add an extra person to do this, right? So what that means is if you've got one person who's almost full-time doing failure mode and effect analysis, you've just reduced your overall testing by that much, right? So you might have a really, really good idea of the testing you're doing and what it means, but unfortunately you're doing it more poorly than you were before because you got fewer people, right? And that doesn't strike me as a process optimization at all, you know. So I mean, if you have money coming out of your ears and you can afford to hire someone to come in and do this, and this is their full-time job, is to be, you know, the risk person, the risk officer of testing, then fine. But you know, otherwise, I think you just can't afford it. It also doesn't respond very well to change, as you might imagine, because when you're talking about trying to update a spreadsheet with 1,000 to 5,000 rows, that's a lot of work, right? And you know, you're going to be constantly behind the curve on that.
So this wouldn't be like the Lance Armstrong bike metaphor that you were using?
It is, yeah. And that's actually, that metaphor works too, because what does Lance Armstrong do? All day, every day.
Right.
Trains to ride his bike, right? It's like marathoners, you know. I mean, you look at these like really serious marathoners, you know, what do? Every day they run. How far do they run? 20, 30 miles, you know. I mean, this just consumes your whole life, you know. So assuming that this is something that you want done within the test team with a minimal impact on the test team and with the existing staff, then failure mode and effect analysis is just not a fit for that, right? It just doesn't make sense. I think if you use the lightweight approach that we looked at earlier, if anything, it potentially reduces the overall amount of work, because you do tend to find in a lot of organizations that you are over-testing to some extent. You find areas where you could reduce your testing a little bit, and the time that you invest in doing the risk analysis you get back in terms of being able to carve some I'm not going to say redundant testing, but testing that is possibly worth the effort you're investing in it. Okay? But failure mode and effect analysis, I would not expect that to happen. I think it's a huge amount of work. Every time we've used it for a client, it's been a major overhead for somebody on the team keeping it up to date.